It's a new year, with new stories waiting to be told. In the last episode, we watched Aunt Bonnie, my queen carpenter ant, preparing for winter. We also welcomed the arrival of a new colony of Camponotus CA02 to replace the minions of Midas, who are currently going through diapause for the winter in a wine fridge. But what I didn't tell you is that they were not the only colony that I ordered. So today, I would like to introduce you to not one, but two new colonies of species I have never kept. Yet both colonies have won me over with their quirky personalities, and neither of them require hibernation. That means we'll be able to get to know these colonies over the next couple months until I wake up my carpenter ants in the spring. Welcome back to the story of the ants. The first colony is a member of the species Pogonomyrmex rugosus, also known as the rough harvester ant. Harvesters are unique because, unlike most ants, they are granivorous, meaning they almost exclusively eat seeds and other grains. These remarkable farmers play an important role in the dispersal of plant seeds and contribute to soil health. Harvester ants also have a painful sting similar to that of a bee, which is impressive for their small size, and are polymorphic, having both standard-size workers and majors. The second colony belongs to Novomessor cockerelli, also known as the desert long-legged ant. And unlike harvesters, these swift little hunters are full-blown carnivores and are known to have a highly aggressive feeding response. Their extended spider-like legs give them a longer stride to move quickly and keep their bodies further away from the scorching desert sands. Looking at these two colonies side by side, they could not be more different. The long legs seem like a cross between a spider and a mantis, and the harvesters have a short, stumpy build like a bulldog. In Star Wars terms, the long legs remind me of... while the harvesters are more like... Their initial responses to being uncovered were different too. The harvesters didn't seem to care at all and went about their business. The long legs, on the other hand, simultaneously froze in place, except for this rookie that didn't get the memo. I also couldn't help but notice the condition of their tubes. The long legs was impressively clean, while the harvesters looked like a complete pigsty. It was now feeding time. These blue feeding trays I got from Eukarya, where I bought the colonies, usually make feeding really easy. But on that first day, everyone was full of energy. Crowding the entrance, running around, moving seeds, friggin' trying to attack the plastic insert. One of them even escaped for a moment before squeezing her way back in. They wouldn't even let me open the tray enough to give them a fruit fly. Now, even though the adults live entirely on seeds, they still need insect protein for the larvae to grow. I watched as they pulled the little fruit fly into the nest, celebrated for a moment, before one of them grabbed it and darted further in. Whoa! What was that? I didn't even notice that till I was reviewing the footage. The long legs got their fruit fly and immediately started working together to rip it apart. Sick. Now, I want to point something out here. Notice how much bigger this worker is than these. That's because these workers were most likely part of the queen's first batch of workers, which are called nanitics. During the founding stage, a queen feeds her first larva with nutrients from her own body, resulting in underfed, smaller workers. Later generations of larvae have their older sisters, bringing them plenty of food from outside the nest, allowing them to reach their full size. You can also see the color difference here between this pale worker that has just eclosed, these slightly darker workers that have been around a week or two, and these fully darkened OGs showing them the ropes. Both of these colonies have so much personality that they really deserve their own video, and they definitely need to be named. Looking at the harvester ants, one name came to mind that I think just fits. I'm going to call them the bulldozers, both for the agricultural reference, but they also seem strong and industrious, like little dwarves that can move a lot of dirt. I could use some help thinking of a name for the queen though, so leave your ideas and vote for your favorites in the comments. And then we have our desert long-legged ants. Because they have learned the ways of the desert and dwell beneath its scorched sands, they shall be known as the Raiders of Arrakis, led by the fearsome Duchess of Dune. I already have stories from these two colonies that I'm eager to share. The bulldozers in particular have been hilarious, but that's a tale for next time, as the story of the ants marches on. A few months ago, I got a new colony of rough harvester ants, which I named the bulldozers, and you're about to see why they quickly became my new favorite colony. Before I had my own colonies, my favorite ant videos to watch were the ones where they had outgrown their old nest and needed to move into a new one. And while the bulldozers hadn't exactly outgrown their test tube, they had the numbers for a new nest. They were also forming tiny prison riots, more desperate to get out than a teenager stuck at a family reunion. Well, far be it from me to deny my little monsters, so I have this desert-themed formicarium that I think will be perfect. And this time, I've got my tools on standby, just in case we get into a situation like before. I connected the tube and watched. For the first time in their lives, the door was open to a world beyond their test tube. They immediately rushed out like a crowd of shoppers on Black Friday. A few started to summit the Great Hill. Others started forming a trash pile. Another why is she walking like that? That's so weird. One great thing about harvester ants is that when it comes to climbing, they have the grip strength of a buttered eel. I'm pretty sure I could leave the lid off and they'll never get out. Once the cave was discovered, they began to venture into the cavern below the mountain, seeing if this could make a suitable home for their beloved queen, who I've decided to name Queen Barley. At this point, word had reached the queen that there was a new world outside the nest. Curious to see if the rumors were true, she headed towards the entrance. Gazing upon what would become her new territory, she decided to fall back and let the workers do their job of securing the land until it was safe. The bulldozers continued mapping all 12 square inches of this vast desert, but it didn't seem like they were ready to move just yet, because I saw some of them bringing seeds and a fruit fly back into the nest, so I left them overnight. The next morning, I found an empty tube, except for one stubborn worker.
I was born in this tube, and I'll die in it.
No, you won't. The bad news is that there was condensation everywhere, which even allowed them to climb the walls. I removed the cover to the nest and these are the lessons that we learn. You see, I had hydrated the nest to raise the humidity, and it was a particularly cold night. So to keep them warm, I put the nest on a heating pad, completely forgetting that warm, humid air plus cold surface equals condensation. They had also seized this opportunity to stick a bunch of sand onto the glass, which now makes it very hard to get a good shot inside the nest. What a bunch of little turds. It's okay though, because I learned my lesson and found out that their genus, Pogonomyrmex, does just fine in extremely dry environments anyway. So, problem solved. Over the next few days, things started to really get entertaining, because from here on out, observing the bulldozers was like watching a tiny sitcom. To start, they changed their minds about where the trash should go, and established a new garbage pile in this corner, which I agree was clearly the right move. The water tower seemed to be getting some attention, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And this worker was just sitting by the cactus, doing weird poses. Why was she doing this? I have no idea, but I'm calling her Yoga Master. I'm calling this one Spider-Man, who is the only one having any success climbing the walls. The more I observed, the funnier things got. These ants are feisty, not too bright, and often display the dexterity of a drunk giraffe on ice skates. But they were busy, except for the ones gathered around the water tower, which had become the cultural hotspot of social activity for the colony. It's just the place to be, I guess. Even the queen came out just to hang out by the water tower. I don't know if they're drinking, plotting, or both, but whatever's happening in these little meetings is serious business. I wondered if this was because I stopped hydrating the nest, and maybe they did like some humidity. So I tried connecting a clean test tube to give them an option. And the next day, they had moved in. Huh. So I plugged the nest entrance, and we'll use this as their outworld. Back in the garden, Yoga Master had gained a follower. I can honestly say I wasn't expecting to find ants teaching wellness classes, yet here we are. Looks like they're doing downward ant. Oh, and their garbage pile had moved yet again. Why? Who can say? I decided to give them some protein and watch how they responded. It was definitely drawing a lot of attention, but no one really knew what to do with it. Their problem-solving skills can sometimes be surpassed by a potato, until one little genius decided to tackle the challenge head-on. Get it? She fought that thing for a while, but I have to admire her resilience here because this ant was not giving up. And although I have seen a toddler handle chopsticks with more grace, she finally managed to get the head out of the dish. Alright, victory! Time to carry it directly into the nest, right? Wrong. I proceeded to watch her wander around the outworld for a painful amount of time. Like, as long as it took to carry the ring to Mordor kinda long. After I had grown a beard and thought about life for a while, she was finally arriving at the nest. Thank God. I thought that... Wait, where are you going? No. Okay, we're good. Wait, no! What? Okay, that's it. Okay. Whew. Glad that's over. I found the hobby of ant keeping to be a lot like gardening. It's not super exciting or flashy, which requires you to slow down and observe. Do that long enough though, and you start to notice all kinds of little patterns, behaviors, and quirks that most people wouldn't see or appreciate. But it's exactly those little things that I've noticed that have caused me to fall in love with keeping these tiny creatures as pets. It's therapeutic and satisfying when you see growth, even if the process is slow. All in all, I have fallen in love with this colony of harvester ants, and I'm excited to watch the journey of the bulldozers continue, as the story of the ants marches on. This is the story of a young colony of desert long-legged ants named the Raiders of Arrakis, led by their queen, the Duchess of Dune. Although their numbers are few, these fearsome little hunters have a fire in them that longs for greatness. But every empire starts as a gamble against extinction, and the desert is unforgiving. If these pioneers hope to become an empire, they must first overcome the challenges ahead. Their species, Novomessor cockerelli, is native to the arid regions of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico. Recognized by their elongated bodies, spider-like legs, and two distinctive spines, they are mainly insectivores, opting for a highly carnivorous diet. While it's fun watching them in the tube, I want to watch them crawl around and explore, so I'll use this outworld I created myself. I'm totally kidding, I bought it. But before I put them in, I'll add an anti-escape barrier. This stuff just makes it super slippery so they can't get out. Time to let my little predators free. Free to roam the vast desert, void of any features or effort put forth by their ant keeper to make it resemble a natural habitat. Look, maybe I was lazy on this one, but eventually I will make them a proper desert landscape. The first worker darted out before I could even hit record. Excuse me, did you hear me say action? Oh wait, no you didn't, because you don't have ears. True fact, ants can't hear. She was soon joined by her sisters as they surveyed the desert land outside their tube for the first time. Now, in my experience, the queens are usually pretty shy and tend to retreat into the nest whenever there's a disturbance. But not the Duchess of Dune. She clambered right up to the action to see what was going on. And I've noticed this on multiple occasions. She is fearless and feisty. She even came out of the nest once, presumably to aid in battle if needed. This little huntress found a piece of mealworm and was trying to bring it back into the nest. Come on. You got it. Almost there. Ah, teammate back there is straight up not helping. Wait, is she giving up? Oh, nope. Looks like she's trying another strategy. Okay. A big reason I wanted a colony of these ants is because they're known to be highly aggressive feeders, which didn't seem to be the case. I wanted to see stuff like this, and this, but they were kind of casual about it, at least for now. At one point, they took fruit flies out of the dish, carried them to the other side of the outworld, and arranged them in a straight line. Somehow this was actually more terrifying. They definitely have a... Hold up, where are you going with that pupa? The desert is no place for a baby. That was weird. They definitely have a battle-ready nature to them. like the fact that there's always a worker standing guard at the entrance of the nest, ready to rally the troops at a moment's notice. However, the colony was about to face a threat that they wouldn't be able to fight with muscle. This began when I found a dead worker. My first reaction was asking, what did I do wrong this time? Because in the past, I've had colonies and queens die because of mistakes that I've made. In fact, I could do a whole video on things I've learned not to do. But as the days went by, everyone else was fine. Until a week later, I found another one. Every passing week brought another casualty. This was worsened by the fact that there wasn't any brood left. And little by little, the colony was shrinking. Until I discovered this. The Duchess had laid a new batch of eggs. Finally, there was some hope for the colony's future. But I still wasn't sure why the other workers were dying. One day, I found body parts all over their test tube. Had they been eating each other? I swear I was feeding them, but maybe it wasn't enough. So I gave them a big old tray of fruit flies. And while they did eat a couple, most of them ended up in their garbage pile, along with another dying worker. I started giving them more and more food, hoping that would turn things around. But they didn't seem interested. I continued anyway, but it wasn't working. The colony was looking sparse, down to just 3 workers and a small pile of brood. I had to try something else. And after talking to some of my ant-keeping friends, I realized there was one very important thing that they needed that I was not giving them enough of. Heat. These were desert ants that thrive at high temperatures, and I'd been keeping them in a room around 68 to 75 degrees. So I changed their setup, putting their tube back on the heat mat and running a heat cable underneath the entrance. Then I waited. A couple weeks later, and the workers were tending to their growing brood over the heat cable, neatly grouped into nice orderly piles by development stage. They also started eating again. The heat was working. That's when my friend Nami hooked me up with an incubator so I could keep them at a controlled, consistent temperature, between 82 and 87 degrees, at least until they got their numbers up. I switched them to a tubs and tubes setup like this, put them in the incubator along with my harvester ants who also like heat, and within a week, I already saw dramatic results. For one, the ants had a lot more energy. Whenever I take the box out and open the lid, they'd run out, zip around the tank ready to fight. These were the little warriors that I knew. I gave them a whole cricket and eagerly waited to see what would happen. One of them started to attack, which was really fun to watch. This is what I was looking for. I never saw her drag it into the nest, but by morning, it was gone. No legs, no head, no antenna, nothing. It had been completely devoured. Every last fragment. The Raiders of Arrakis were back. The Duchess was ramping up egg production too, and their brood pile started to grow. Eggs, larvae, and pupa, soon to join the colony and strengthen its numbers. Several weeks later, and the Raiders of Arrakis now stand 12 warriors strong, with many reinforcements on the way. The incubator was really the secret to their resurgence, which has also benefited another rising power, the bulldozers, my colony of rough harvester ants who have now amassed a pile of brood to rival that of the Raiders. In fact, at the time of filming this, both colonies stand at exactly 12 workers, with a population boom on the horizon. And that's when I realized this wasn't just growth, this was an arms race. A war was brewing to become the dominant force of the desert. The question is, which faction will rise to power first? We'll just have to wait and see as the story of the ants marches on. Last April, some friends of mine happened to catch some newly mated carpenter ant queens for me. I was very excited because I was brand new to the hobby of ant keeping, and this was my first time starting new colonies. If you're just jumping in and haven't seen that part of the story, I'd recommend starting with this episode so you can watch the full journeys of these queens unfold. I promise it will make this story all the more impactful and special. Of the 5 ant queens I started the year with, 2 of them, named Queen Midas and Aunt Bonnie, went on to successfully start their own colonies. But the queen of the Relic Raiders, who I named Laura Croft, was having a bit of trouble. She was eating some of her brood, but the ones that remained never made it past the larval stage. Even 4 months later, after her peers had already had workers, her brood did not seem to be developing. I thought perhaps that she was infertile and decided to release her by burying the test tube and letting nature run its course. And that was that. I figured it was the end of it and that she'd probably died months ago. This is my garden. Well, it's actually just neighborhood common area behind my house that I shamelessly terraformed for myself. Anyway, this is the spot where I buried Laura Croft, and every time I'm out here, I look over and wonder, what would I find? So last week, curiosity finally got the better of me, and I decided to dig up the test tube, just to see what I would find, fully expecting to uncover a dead ant, a bunch of dirt, or just an empty tube. I looked into the exposed empty tube, and saw something I didn't expect. That was a larva. But I didn't see the queen. I cleared away a bit more dirt and... Is that her? I was honestly shocked. I was not expecting to find her alive. I had buried her on August 3rd, which was over 6 months ago. She had spent 4 months in the box and another 6 months in the ground. She was literally back from the grave. Seeing as it's the middle of winter, she's probably going through diapause, which is perhaps why she's survived this long. She started poking her head out of the entrance before scurrying back into the tube. She was trying to figure out what the heck was going on, since she's spent over half a year in complete darkness. Question for all of you ant keepers out there. Does anyone know why she still doesn't have workers after 10 months? If she wasn't fertile, they would still be eggs, right? And the larvae are clearly still alive or they would have dried up. The next step was to give her a clean test tube. If you haven't made a test tube setup before, here's a quick 15-second tutorial. First, wash your hands and tools really well. Next, you want to fill your test tube with filtered or distilled water until it's about a third full. Then, take a cotton ball or test tube sponge, slide it down to the water while trying to eliminate air bubbles. Finally, you can dry the inside off with a cotton ball and you're done. When I started clearing out the debris, she was definitely on the defensive, guarding her nest against the evil metal tweezers. I even found the piece of foil where I left her a drop of honey. I wish I could go 6 months on a drop of honey. Next, I connected the tubes using the foam block and waited, and almost immediately she went in to explore. When she came out, she just kind of stood there, cleaning herself for a while, trying to figure out what to do. Then eventually walked over to one of the larvae and... Nope, not yet. I've never managed to capture a move on camera before because it usually takes several hours or days before they decide to move. But Laura Croft was not enjoying the light. Then, she gently picked up one of the larvae and started to head towards the cave entrance. One by one, she brought each of her babies into the new home. This process was slow, but felt really special to watch. However, when she ventured out to retrieve the last larva, she couldn't seem to find it, even though it was right under her nose. Looking all around, thinking, I know I left it here somewhere. Come on, girl, you're sitting on it. Then she started going back. No, wait, don't give up yet. It's right there. I came back a few hours later, and she had reclaimed the lost larva. Now she was all moved in, and I disconnected the old tube. I think it's so fitting that her name is Laura Croft, given that she spent 6 months in a tomb. But I'm wondering if the name Relic Raiders is still fitting after this resurrection story, or if we should give her and or her colony a new name if these larvae can develop into workers. I'd be eager to hear your ideas and suggestions in the comments. I still don't know if she'll be able to raise mature workers, but it feels like a miracle to find out that one of my original carpenter ant queens is still alive. I'm going to put her away for now, and who knows, maybe in a couple months we'll see some workers. But we'll just have to wait and see as the story of the ants marches on. Today, I'm on a quest to witness the genesis of how new ant colonies are born. When conditions are just right, thousands of winged males and females leave their nests and take to the skies to mate in what's called a nuptial flight. Determining exactly when and where a nuptial flight will take place is a complex and inexact science, But luckily, my friend Nami is an expert. He's been on the road a lot lately, catching queens and tracking weather conditions for when different species are going to fly. And today, I get to tag along as we search for the largest carpenter ants in all of North America, Camponotus CA02. Since carpenter ants are nocturnal, we won't see any out foraging until the sun goes down, but we can locate their nests. Nami is a walking ant encyclopedia and can often identify the species just by looking at a hole in the dirt. He also has his own site called Antlantis where you can buy the ants he catches. So we start looking in leaf litter and under logs, but we don't see any signs of them. We did find a colony of termites though, and here you can see one of the soldiers. Unlike ants, termites have a queen and a king to produce all of the workers for their colony. As we continued searching, we spotted a ton of other ant species, like this colony of Myrmecocystus wheeleri, a reddish-orange honeypot ant. Honeypots are the ones with those balloon-like piñatas called repletes that store food and water. Then these harvester ants, who were up to no good, started making trouble in the neighborhood. Sorry. A little ways down we found some chromatogasters, also known as Valentine ants because of their heart-shaped booties. They also go by Acrobat ants because they like to flip that little booty over their head when threatened to spray formic acid onto their enemies, showering them in a painful rain of dissolving chemicals that cause them to scream like the heathens they are. I found this winged elate of an unknown species, and these less common winter ants. These ants are only active during the winter when many other species are going through diapause, which is kind of a dumb strategy because while you do avoid competition with other species, winter is cold and scarce in resources, which is why other species aren't active. As a result, their colonies grow very, very slowly, unlike these velvety tree ants that Nami pointed out.
They would be one of those colonies where it's just gonna blow up, like thousands of workers. So they grow really quickly and they require a lot of food.
We even found a queen crazy ant just scurrying along the ground. Crazy ants got their name because they move like a panicked squirrel that lost his nuts, which tracks given how hard she was to record. But with all these species just in this area, it had me asking the question why we would only expect carpenter ants to have a nuptial flight today.
The reason we're seeing different things fly at different times is for a multitude of reasons. One is competition, right? So you gotta think, if 30 species all fly at the same time, right, all those queens are gonna have to basically compete for the same amount of resources that are available at that given time period. And for a young colony, it can be really difficult to do, and especially if there's 30 of them that are also competing with other mature colonies. By basically designating certain triggers, I mean, this is how nature's balanced itself out, is different things fly at different times of the year, with different other conditions, right? So Camponotus CA02, for example, flies around this time of year due to heat.
There are a lot of factors that go into triggering any given species to fly. Things like time of year, temperature, humidity, rain, wind speed, and even air pressure can play a factor in triggering a nuptial flight. But generally, a good time to look is the day after a rain when the soil is soft. Then we made an exciting discovery.
So right here, if you look, you'll see a chamber of probably a honeypot ant. Out here, there's Myrmecocystus wheeleri and Myrmecocystus testaceus. One way to really know that this is probably a queen chamber versus just a regular nest is first, the hole is much larger, and then on top of it, the granules that you see are kind of in a half moon shape, means that she just probably started probably last night. And then the dirt that's following, accompanying it, if you look, is really oval-like, much larger. Regular workers can't carry that. They need to be able to do that so they can dig much faster and deeper, because the time that they have in terms of getting away from predators is much shorter.
Nami explained that the amount of dirt outside the hole can tell you how deep she's burrowed. For this one, he said I should dig about 3 to 4 inches, something I failed to do on my first try. Then, the best technique is to spread the dirt out evenly, something I also failed to do here. Then, it's a matter of sifting through the dirt to find the queen. But as I quickly learned, just because you found a chamber does not mean that you found a queen. Many chambers are raided by predators, like this camel spider, because an unprotected queen is an easy meal without the risk of an angry colony coming after you. The second chamber we found, I did much better. 3 to 4 inches down, spread the dirt, find the queen. I want to point out that we're only digging up queens on the trail. Not just because they're more convenient and easier to spot, but also because these queens are not as likely to succeed. It's right in the path of human foot traffic, and because they're so exposed, The chambers are more easily spotted by us and by predators. It's also important that we cover up the holes we dig. We want to leave nature the way that we found it and not create scars. After digging up several empty chambers with no luck, we finally spotted one, Myrmecocystus testaceus, also known as the brick honeypot ant. And this one is special, because she is the first queen I've ever caught myself. She's got a dark body with light brown legs and amber-colored hairs on her abdomen. We put her in a capsule and kept looking. When a species decides to have a nuptial flight, there can be thousands of newly mated queens in that area, all looking for a suitable place to start their own colony. After digging up a few more chambers, I found a second queen. This was very exciting because my other colony of honeypot ants named the gumdrops had a series of die-offs, leaving just the queen, which usually means that the colonies failed. So getting another chance to get a honeypot colony started is a dream come true. After filling in the hole, it was time to move on. The sun was starting to go down, which means it was nearing the time when carpenter ants start to fly. So we hiked back to the trailhead and strapped on our headlamps. That was about the time we met Francisco, who showed up also looking for queen ants. So the three of us set off down the trail together in search of Camponotus CA02. We encountered so many creatures, it was like real-life Pokemon.
Nice.
So cute. We were just three nerds on a nighttime safari. Oh, and then Nami's friend Brad showed up. We were just four nerds on a nighttime safari talking about ants, insects, and animals. Apparently, Francisco is also a beetle enthusiast and got really excited when we came across some rotting wood. Like, grab a bag, I'm taking this all home excited. And then we spotted them. Carpenter ants. Tons of them. And they were huge. This is an average size worker, and this is a super major. Truly an impressive monster of an ant. My own colony of CaO2, the minions of Midas, have been hibernating in a wine fridge for the winter. A couple weeks ago, it was time to wake them up. But unfortunately, they didn't make it. At some point in the last couple months, the temperature of the fridge got too cold. It was an honest mistake, and if I had been checking on them periodically, I probably could have saved them before it was too late. But I am determined to raise a healthy colony of these magnificent carpenter ants, which is why I'm out looking for new queens. And hopefully, all of the mistakes I've made on this channel will help some of you avoid the same missteps with your own colonies. Unfortunately, we didn't see any with wings, which means they decided not to fly today. Even though the conditions seem perfect, nature follows her own schedule. But before we left, I found one last honeypot queen crawling along the ground, which I collected. Even though we didn't find what we came for, I still had an amazing day. I walked away with 3 new honeypot queens, saw a ton of amazing wildlife, and spent time with some great people. After all, the best part of an adventure isn't the destination, but the surprises along the way. Like my new honeypot queens, whose journeys are just beginning, as the story of the ants marches on. I have a box, a mystery box. A mystery box that contains 2 unknown species of ants. Not that they're new species or anything, I just don't know what they are. Tony from Stateside Ants sent this to me because he thought it would be fun to send me a mystery box of mystery ants. But enough about the box. If you've been following my channel, you'll know that every time I introduce a new type of ant to my collection, we discover different behaviors and personalities, which makes the hobby really fun. My harvester ants, the bulldozers, honestly make me laugh with just how weird they are. My long-legged ants, the raiders of Arrakis, are feisty little hunters that are just itching for a fight. My lone carpenter ant queen, Laura Croft, who survived 6 months underground after I thought she was dead, has a single giant larva that she's very protective of. And my trio of honeypot ants I caught, who I've been calling Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, are currently in the founding stage of starting their own colonies. The point is, Whatever species are in this box are bound to have their own personalities and quirks we get to observe. So, without further delay, let's see what we got. And thank you to Stateside Ants for this fun surprise. Whoa, these are some very tiny ants. I counted about 100 workers and the tube still has a lot of room. And look at those noggins. These are definitely big-headed ants.
Okay, stop the video for a second. So there's this guy, Matthew Yanchek, that's been leaving comments on every single video, telling me that I should get a colony of Pheidole bicarinata, which are big-headed ants. It's even in his profile pic. Well, Matthew, today is your lucky day because this species is Pheidole bicarinata.
I truly didn't know that big-headed ants were so small. I had to get a new lens just to get close-ups. Just look at them next to my desert long-legged ants, who now look like towering giants. Those bobble-headed workers serve as the colony's muscle, using their oversized skulls to crush seeds, defend the nest, and haul around food like tiny forklifts. But of course, they need a name and a logo. I've decided to name this colony the Megamines. For obvious reasons, I thought this was fitting, and their leader shall be known as Queen Cerebella, continuing with the brainy theme. The second species is Tetramorium immigrans, the immigrant pavement ant. Now, pavement ants may sound kind of boring because they don't have a visible party trick like massive heads or bubble butts. But let me tell you why they're arguably even more impressive. Originally from Europe, these ants hitched a ride to North America over 2 centuries ago. Now, they're one of the continent's most common urban dwellers. Masters of adaptation, pavement ants like building intricate nests under sidewalks and foundations. Every spring, rival colonies turn sidewalks into battlegrounds, fighting over their right to rule the streets. Thousands are killed in these territory wars, but they have the numbers, with gangs being able to reach over 10,000 rebels, all orchestrated by a single queenpin. In fact, these ants are so tough and adaptable that in 2014, their resilience earned them a spot aboard the International Space Station, helping scientists study behavior in microgravity. That's right, this exact species has been to space. With all that in mind, I'm naming this colony the Concrete Rebels, the urban brawlers of the city streets, organized by their boss, the Queenpin. I don't want to risk feeding them in the tube and letting them out, so I'm going to put them in their own outworlds. No sand though. It's already hard enough recording these tiny ants without them camouflaging against the dirt. I made sure to use an outworld with super thin air slits so they can't escape. Let's unleash the Megamines first. I pulled out the cotton, and immediately they were early investigators. Rumors started to spread across the test tube that there was an opening in their headquarters way down at the far end of the corridor. Suddenly, chaos, with the ants outside the nest darting left and right trying to figure out what was going on. I dropped in a fruit fly, which was discovered by this worker. Then this major came along and was about to haul it into... Oh, okay, never mind. Let's leave this party for a minute and visit the Concrete Rebels, who are huddled up at the back of the test tube, except for a few scouts down at the far side that were futilely trying to dig their way out. Time to open the gates and see what happens. As ants started rushing out to explore, these two messengers brought word back to the colony. You could practically hear them yelling, "Guys, you're not gonna believe this." Hearing the biggest news of their little lives, a line of workers started marching down the street to see for themselves. It was such a big deal that even the Queenpin had to come and see the open tube with her own eyes. And this little one was having a Samwise Gamgee moment.
If I take one more step, it'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been.
Back at Megamind HQ, that major finally came back around for the fruit fly. One super helpful worker decided to hitch a ride on top of the fly. There was a lot going on. Check out this new major who hasn't darkened yet. They're kind of squishy until their exoskeleton is fully hardened. I watched them drink a single drop of nectar, which looked like a swimming pool. And the best thing about this was, whoa, we got a runner. How did she get out? I found a teeny tiny crack between the panels that she was able to squeeze through, which gave me an idea of how good these ants might be at escaping if I'm not careful. So I patched the crack with some tape. These ants are really cute, with their short little legs and lobed antennas. I let this one hang out with me on my desk for a while. Weeks later, I found a plant starting to grow inside the Megamind HQ. They must be running some experiments. The plant kept growing over the next week or so, and I kinda like it. Honestly, I think these two colonies are great. Both species are extremely hardy and easy to keep, making them ideal for beginners. I'm sure there will be plenty of new adventures that unfold as they continue to grow, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see as the story of the ants marches on. A little while ago, my friend Nami and I set out hoping to catch some carpenter ant queens during a nuptial flight. What we found instead were brick honeypot ants, Myrmecocystus testaceus. After digging up some chambers, I found 3 queens, the first I've ever caught. And now, they are safely in their test tubes, undergoing the greatest challenge of their lives. This is the story of my 3 honeypot queens, and their journeys to start their own colonies. In my opinion, the founding stage, while laborious for them, is probably the most rewarding as an ant keeper. There's something special about witnessing the trial and birth of a new colony from a single queen. It's an intimate process that's usually hidden from us underground, and I want to share that process with you. Meet Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, our soon-to-be matriarchs. Through experience, I've learned a couple things about keeping honeypot ants. 1, they need heat. These are desert ants, and I learned this lesson too late with the gumdrops. However, this particular species likes it a bit cooler than other honeypots, around 78 degrees Fahrenheit. 2, they're also more sensitive and delicate than other species until the colonies mature, which is why I have 3 for redundancy, and I'm only checking on them every 2 weeks. After a couple weeks, I saw a little cluster of eggs from Blossom. Bubbles had a handful of eggs here and there on the sides of the tube and on the sponge. And from my out-of-focus camera work, Buttercup had a few blurry eggs bunched together and managed to stick a couple on the ceiling. I didn't get a lot of great footage from this week, so let's skip ahead to week 4. There were a lot more visible eggs this time. Still pretty hard to see them against the sand, which is there so that the larvae can spin their cocoons. But I counted around 30 eggs for Blossom, which is amazing. This really made me happy to see since there weren't many last time. Time to check on Bubbles, who was looking after about 22 eggs. And finally, Buttercup had around 25. All 3 of these girls were on the right track, and we'll see you in another couple weeks. When you've got a new queen, it can be really hard not to check on them, but it's really important that you leave them alone as much as you can so they don't get stressed and eat their eggs. I learned this lesson that, oh my god, there were tons of eggs. Look at all those. Blossom has been busy. There were over 60 eggs in there. Let's check in on Bubbles. Hers were especially difficult to count against the grains of sand, but after careful examination, I counted around 50 eggs. Good job, girl. Last, but certainly not least, was Buttercup, who was definitely in the lead with around 75 eggs. These numbers seemed insanely high to me, but maybe that's because last year I raised carpenter ants, who grow a lot slower. Then we were seeing around 6 to 7 eggs for their first round of workers. I was on a call with Nami talking about ants, as one does when you're obsessed with ants, and told him about how well the queens were doing.
Oh, they have a ton of eggs. Oh,
yeah.
Let me ask you though, are their eggs by any chance scattered?
Let me check. Okay, Queen A, yes. Queen B, scattered. Queen, yeah, they're like all over the place. Why?
Cool. I don't know how else to say this because I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it sounds like those queens are probably infertile.
Oh, shoot. Are you serious?
Yeah.
So, wait, if they are fertile, they clump them together?
Typically, right? But the scatteredness, that's like a very common behavior by ants that are infertile.
That probably means that they can lay a lot more eggs too, which is what we're seeing. If they've got 60, 70 eggs.
Well, basically, reason that's happening is because typically what happens is queens will actually lay infertile eggs. They're called like trophic eggs. Basically, they're eggs that are just going to be used as food for larvae. So what that queen is probably doing is it's laying infertile eggs, also laying trophic eggs. But those trophic eggs, which would typically get fed back to the larvae, aren't being fed because there's no larvae to feed. So it's this never-ending cycle of just laying eggs that nothing is being done with. That's why you're seeing all those eggs.
You were telling me that the infertility rate of honeypots is like super high.
So with the spring honeypots, the spring flying ones, it tends to be a little higher. What happens in the springtime is sometimes one colony flies and another one doesn't. So let's say colony A flies and colony B doesn't. There's a lot of inbreeding that happens, or perhaps if there's not inbreeding, the queens which fly can't find males to mate with. Sometimes they'll drop their wings thinking that they're fertile, and then other times they won't.
Dang.
It's a big bummer, right? And that's part of why, as an ant seller, I don't like to sell ant queens, because then, you buy an ant from me, there isn't a guarantee of them being fertile. Like at the end of the day, I can't like manually go and check. And then on top of it, there's founding risks. Once you get a colony, your chances go up much higher.
Needless to say, this was devastating news. Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, who we've been bonding with and rooting for over the last 6 weeks, were all infertile. So, is this the end of the story? Well, not necessarily. You see, I may have left out a few details about that day we caught them. We actually caught an additional 5 queens that I didn't tell you about that have also been incubating their eggs on a heat cable this whole time. I really only want 1 colony, but for the reasons Nami just explained, he convinced me to get a bunch of them just to be safe. So I did, but I thought 3 was better from a storytelling perspective, and thus
The Powerpuff Girls were born!
Okay, but hold up a minute. That doesn't mean that the other 5 queens were fertile either. I hadn't been following their progress as closely, and for all I knew, the eggs could be scattered as well, or they could be dead. I started with Queen D, and lo and behold, she had a nicely clumped pile of eggs. So that's at least one viable beacon of hope. Now for Queen E, who didn't look like she had any eggs at all. Sorry girl, it's not your fault. Queen F's turn. She had a few, but much like the socks in my room, they were not all in the same place. This wasn't looking good so far. Come on Queen G, show us what you got. Thankfully, she too had a cluster of precious eggies, and a couple rejects on the side of the tube. Look, if you're gonna play favorites with your children, at least wait till they're born so they can really feel that rejection. And finally, Queen H, who I could see right off the bat was crushing it. She had a tight group of eggs, and just look at how full her gaster is. She is bursting at the seams and has a lot more eggs on the way. Well, how about that? Unfortunately, it didn't work out for our original trio, but we found exactly 3 more to take their place. So we're just gonna do a little switcheroo and make these ladies the new
Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup.
3 in, 3 out. Who's gonna know?
Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know.
And if you take issue with that, remember that these are ants. So let's leave our new stars for another 2 weeks and let them work their motherly magic. Whoa! Blossom already has 5 cocoons, 4 larvae, and about 13 eggs, which we now know might just be food for the larvae. Amazing! Bubbles was just a little behind, but still doing well with about 9 eggs and 6 larvae. And Buttercup now has about 30 eggs grouped in piles around her, but I do see about 4 larvae, so they are developing. Then I found something interesting when checking on the remaining 2 queens. Queen E, who hadn't laid any eggs, didn't make it. But Queen F, whose eggs were scattered last time, are now clumped in a neat little pile. I don't know what this means, but Queen F is getting a name. Fiona, Faith, Frankie, Faye, Francine, Debbie. Yep, she's gonna be Debbie. It is shocking that only 3 of the 8 queens are probably fertile. That's a 37% fertility rate. Another good reason why it's safer to order young colonies rather than queens, especially for species like honeypots and harvesters that are highly sensitive in the founding stage. If you've been thinking about getting your own colonies, Nami's site, Antlantis.com, is now giving my viewers 15% off with the promo code ColesAnts. And they really do focus on setting people up with healthy colonies. But the journey of our 3 heroes, plus Debbie, is far from over. Will they successfully launch and rule their own dynasties? Could Debbie be fertile after all? We'll just have to wait and see, as the story of the ants marches on. Back in February, I managed to catch 3 queen ants of the species Myrmecocystus testaceus, the brick honeypot ant. Since then, we've been following the stories of Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, and the challenges that come with trying to found a new colony. They've been putting in the hard work of laying eggs, feeding larvae with their own nutrient reserves, and waiting patiently in hopes they make it to the day when they welcome their first daughters into the world. And last time you saw them, they were getting very close. When we left them, Blossom was well in the lead with 5 cocoons, 4 larvae, and about 13 eggs. Bubbles had 6 larvae and 9 eggs, and Buttercup had 5 larvae and about 30 eggs grouped in piles around her. We also discovered that one of the infertile queens, named Debbie, started grouping her eggs together, which could be a sign that she might be fertile after all. Side note, there have been a handful of you informing me that there is a 4th Powerpuff Girl, to which I respectfully say, I don't care. Moving on. 2 weeks later, and it was time to check on their progress. Blossom is once again in the lead, now with 14 cocoons, 1 larva, and a bunch of eggs. She is performing above and beyond my expectations. Bubbles' brood is still growing, but for some reason is having a hard time. Her brood pile is larger than before, but it's kinda hard to tell what's what. Is that a leg? She also has a few randomly scattered eggs around the tube. Buttercup's 5 larvae have now turned into 5 cocoons, with some other larvae, eggs, and whatever this is. Looks like a pupa that forgot to make a cocoon? I didn't even know that could happen. Some species don't make cocoons, but these do, so that's unusual. But the big question on my mind is, what about Debbie? Could she surprise us? Hi, Debbie. Unfortunately, a lot of her eggs are scattered around the tube once more, which is a common indicator of infertility. But I do see a blurry clump of eggs, so we'll give her more time. 10 days later, and I had a good feeling when I went to check on Blossom. Alright, let's go! We have a colony! This moment always makes me so happy to see these little ones freshly born, but already eager to do any work the colony needs. But work requires energy, so let's give them their first meal and see how they respond. Stimulated by the movement, the colony began to stir. One brave worker boldly led the charge down the tube, followed by one of her sisters. But upon reaching the mysterious food object, she chickened out and ran away. I watched them do this little dance for a while, daring each other to go touch it like the butt scene from Finding Nemo.
I'm gonna go touch the butt!
One of them didn't know what to do, but felt the need to be productive, so she started moving this cocoon shell around with no particular goal in mind. This doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast, so let's check on the others. Bubbles still doesn't have any workers, but she does have a pupa. Buttercup, on the other hand, now has her first 2 workers, and they're ghostly white, which means they probably just emerged earlier today. It looks like she also has more cocoons ready to hatch soon, so we can officially call them a colony. Let's give them some food as well. I waited for a response, but nothing happened. Sometimes it takes a while, so I left both tubes exposed while I did other things so I could catch the action when something finally happened. I wonder how Debbie's doing. Hi, Debbie. Still no larva, I see. I'm sorry, girl. I noticed her reaching for her clump of eggs, like she just wanted a little more time to try. Okay, Debbie, but it's not your fault if it doesn't happen. Back to the other colonies. In Blossom's test tube, we have this one doing a little jig of some kind. Hey, you do you. And another worker had finally touched the fruit fly, which is good protein to help the other brood grow. I can tell that this one had a good drink of nectar by her inflated abdomen. And you can see the chemical communication happening in real time as those workers who found food are now emitting pheromones that say, I just found some food over there and it was pretty good. Notice how the queen's antennas are waving around here as she picks up the message. Blossom hasn't had a meal in 77 days at this point, so she's hungry and was lured away from her throne by the thought of drinking some of that tasty nectar. But a queen needs to play it safe, and decided to be patient and head back. Whereas no one had to tell Queen Buttercup there was food, she was the first to mosey on up to the dish all by herself, while her daughters stayed behind. but she too got nervous about venturing too far from the throne and decided to turn back. I left them alone for a day and came back to find very different results. Blossom's colony had completely covered their dish in dirt. I guess that means they're done. I've heard that ants bury their used food sources to prevent other colonies from finding it. That's pretty cool that they know to do that on instinct. Buttercup's dish, on the other hand, did not have a speck of dirt on it, but there was something in the nectar. One of her only 2 workers had gotten stuck and drowned. I don't know why this happened, but any casualties at this delicate stage are detrimental to the colony's chances of survival. Fortunately, though, 2 weeks later, and Buttercup has had 5 more workers join the party. She and her colony are looking very well fed, as you can see by how full of nectar their gasters are. Good news for Bubbles is that she finally has her first daughter. The bad news is she only has 1, and I don't see a lot of other brood. I'm not sure why she's so behind. Blossom has now gone from 9 workers to 15. Her colony is off to a healthy start, and I'm growing confident that she's going to be our winner. And now it's time for my favorite part, giving our new colonies a name and identity. I've had a lot of colonies over the last year and a half, which represent a lot of lessons learned on how to care for these amazing creatures. So if you've had colonies die, don't feel bad. It's part of the process. And honeypots in particular are not a beginner species, especially when starting from a single queen. So the fact that we have 2 promising colonies is amazing. Bubbles still only has 1 worker, and sadly it doesn't look like there are any more on the way. Since they aren't much of a colony, I'm going to hold off on giving them a name unless she's somehow able to turn things around. Let's start with our leading champion, Blossom, who has been in first place since the beginning. I wanted something that went well with her floral name, but wasn't too cutesy or girly. I landed on the Rosebuds, because roses are beautiful and they have thorns, and their repletes can resemble little flower buds, ready to provide sweet nectar to the colony. Now for Buttercup's colony. I'd thrown around a bunch of ideas, but one name that started as a joke just seemed to stick. It's kinda dumb, but also fits perfectly. Hear me out. Her name is Buttercup, which makes me think of a peanut butter cup, but also after the Powerpuff Girls, right? And honeypot ants also puff up like balloons. So the only logical combination of those concepts is
Reese's Puffs, peanut butter chocolate flavor. Reese's Puffs.
I told you it was kind of dumb, but I actually love it. The Rosebuds are doing well enough that I'm going to give them a small outworld to make feeding easier. And there we go. Eventually, I want to move them into this setup once they have enough workers. Honeypot ants need a ceiling for the repletes to hang from to store food, so top-down nests won't work. And upright formicariums like this provide that ceiling, but can be pretty dark for me to capture on camera because pressing my lens up against the glass blocks most of the light. But this one lets light in on both sides, so I'll be able to capture those beautiful repletes in full glory. I'll continue to keep an eye on Bubbles, but her chances aren't looking good. Sometimes this just happens, which is why ant colonies play the numbers game and release thousands of queens in hopes a handful of them will make it through and grow mature colonies. Remember that I started with 8 queens, and it looks like Bubbles and Debbie just didn't make the cut. We do have the Rosebuds and the Reese's Puffs, though, that have made it to the colony stage, which is a big victory. But our honeypot ants aren't out of the woods yet. As I've said before, these ants are very sensitive in the early stages. I'm optimistic based on their progress, but there's no guarantee that they'll make it to a thriving colony. And I've already started to face their next challenge. They don't seem to be eating any protein. The Rosebuds even picked up the fruit fly I gave them and dropped it into the nectar dish. Maybe in protest? Maybe for added flavor? I don't know. I tried filling the other side with fresh nectar, and one worker came out to inspect. She wasn't interested though and went back inside. I don't see them come out very often, and both colonies don't seem to have much of an appetite in general. But Queen Blossom and the other workers look well fed on nectar, so I guess they're okay. The Rosebuds have a bunch of cocoons which don't need any food, but they do have larvae too, which needs protein to grow. The queens also need protein to keep laying eggs. Queen Buttercup looks nice and fat with nectar as well, so I'm not too worried. I've started to give them different types of food in hopes that they'll start eating again. I've learned that young colonies can be super picky about their diet, and it may just be a matter of finding something they like. Or it could just be that they don't need much protein right now because they're so small. The day before I posted this video, Bubbles had a surprise in store. She had another worker. Even better, she had larvae that were moving around. This gave me hope that she might be able to pull through and raise her own colony after all. However their next chapter unfolds, I'm rooting for these little ants and have big hopes for their future. Will they start eating again and continue to grow? Will we eventually get to watch them outgrow their test tube and move into a new home? Could Bubbles catch up and turn her luck around? We'll just have to wait and see as the story of the ants marches on. A couple months ago, I got a call from my friend Nami saying the conditions were once again looking ideal for carpenter ants to have a nuptial flight. And although I was about to hop on a plane early the next morning, I might not get another chance. The species I'm after is Camponotus CA02. For over a year now, I've been trying to raise a colony of these massive and majestic carpenter ants, but I've had 2 failed attempts that were unfortunately my fault. Yet, I am determined once more to try again. The question was, would I be able to find any, or did I drive all the way out here for nothing? Tonight would be an adventure of, oh, hey, there's one. Well, that was quick. I kind of thought that the whole search would make for a full episode, but I guess not. There were queens crawling around all over the place. Thousands of them, all looking for a good spot to dig their chambers. As you can see from my clearly experienced hands, I have not caught many queens, so it took me a little while to get her in the capsule. But eventually I got her, and I wasn't the only one out there. Nami was there, I saw Francisco from last time, a handful of other people, and my brother. We were all having fun hanging out, walking around catching queens, and finding cool bugs. This is Myrmecocystus wheeleri, a beautiful golden-colored honeypot queen. And here's another Myrmecocystus testaceus, like the ones that I caught last time. But mostly, we saw the big CA02 queens. Now, I just want to make a quick note here about over-collecting, because there were some people there collecting way more than they needed. Nami collected a bunch, but he has an actual business and permits, and he still doesn't collect more than he thinks he can sell. But a couple people had a bag with hundreds of queens, just for fun, which is wrong and unethical. While going out and catching ants is great, I would say over-collecting means taking more than you can properly care for. I decided to take 2 home. This is Queen Midas III, carrying on the legacy of my favorite queen from last year, and accompanying her is Queen Aurum, which is the Latin word for gold. These 2 sisters have quite a journey ahead of them, not only because the founding stage is incredibly challenging for new queens, but because I'm about to attempt something kinda crazy, combining them into a single test tube to see if they can work together in founding a colony. Why is this a big deal? Well, there are 2 primary strategies that ants have when it comes to their queens. About 15 to 20% of species are polygynous, meaning they have multiple queens, allowing them to grow rapidly and spread quickly to new areas. Most ants, however, like Camponotus here, are monogamous, meaning the colony will only tolerate 1 queen on the throne. So then why would I put them in a tube together? Why risk what I've been trying to... Oops. Oh, Queen Aurum did not want to go in the tube. She had other plans to explore my desk. Once again, you can witness how incredibly skilled I am at scooping up queen ants. I'm just afraid that I'll accidentally squish her if I try and pick her up. But eventually, I got her into the tube. Where were we? Oh yeah. Why would I risk putting them in the same tube? Am I just cruel and enjoy watching animals fight? Well, aside from Pokemon, no. I have my reasons, but let's see if they accept each other first, and then I'll explain. Queen Aurum looked around at her new chamber, smelling that she was not the only one there. Without delay, she approached Queen Midas, who slowly turned around to find that she too was not alone. Then to my relief, they exchanged a friendly greeting, but I still watched carefully, ready to intervene if things went south. While we watch these 2 get acquainted and used to each other's presence, let me tell you why I'm doing this. In the wild, there are actually a few major benefits to founding a colony together. With 2 queens to feed the brood, there are more resources to go around, usually resulting in larger first-gen workers. 2, You also get a bigger first generation of workers, which means you have a head start over other colonies because you can collect more food. And third, if one queen dies, her brood will be inherited by the other queen rather than die with her. This co-founding strategy is called pleiometrosis. Now in reality, the chances of them attacking each other at this stage are very low. They recognize that teaming up for now will increase their chances of success, and in nature, that's all that matters. Speaking of increasing their chances, I'm giving them some nectar to sustain them, since they will not eat again until their future children can bring them food. Now notice here that Queen Aurum, the one drinking, has a smaller gaster than Queen Midas. She kept drinking and drinking and drinking as I watched her gaster fill up with nectar. Queen Midas chose to hang back, but Queen Aurum kept going back for more, trying to slurp up every last bit. I'm actually impressed. That would be like drinking an entire cooler full of fruit punch in one go. Oof. Once she was done, she went back to her sister and shared the meal with her. This act of teamwork told me that an alliance had been made and that the two queens would be okay. 1 week later, and we're about to find out if that's still the case. And they are besties, huddled up together nurturing their first eggs, which already puts them well ahead of the first Queen Midas, who didn't lay any eggs until her 3rd week, at which point she only had 3. They already had 8. The following week, they were up to 25 eggs, which means that this partnership is working. Our dynamic duo is on a roll, but unfortunately, this heartwarming tale of sisterhood is not a permanent arrangement. You see, even if they're fine with ruling together, their daughters won't be. There will eventually come a point, usually after their first diapause, when the workers decide that they only need one queen. When that happens, they will choose the healthiest, most fertile queen to be their monarch, and the other will be ripped apart limb from limb. Nature is brutal, so my plan is to found them together to see what we can learn, then split the colony before that happens. After 6 weeks, they had cocoons, 7 cocoons and 13 larvae. This is where their chances of success go up. Because as larvae, they're growing in size and need to be fed from the queen's reserves. But once those larvae spin their cocoons, they no longer require nutrients until they're born. The following week, most of the brood had turned into cocoons. It was only a matter of time now before their first daughters would emerge from their little sleeping bags, which could happen any day now. But we'll save that for next time, as the story of the ants. No, I'm just kidding, we're not going to end it there. We're so close. 3 days later, I went back to check on the queen's sisters. Oh my gosh. Welcome to the world, little ones. Can you guess which one is your real mom? Their color is so pretty. It looks like the second worker hasn't quite woken up yet after... Your Highness, you're sitting on your child. Your Majesty, stop! I think it's time for their first meal. Does anyone know what this is stuck to the cotton ball? It looks like a hollow cocoon with a booger inside. We weren't getting any takers for the nectar, and they were kind of freaking out being in the light, so I covered up part of the tube and waited. There were a few attempts made. Come on, girl. I know you're hungry. No one came out to drink the nectar, but I noticed that they were already started on their second batch of eggs. Another week went by, and we have a colony, which means we can officially welcome the minions of Midas back to the team. Queen Midas and Queen Aurum have made it through the hardest part together. I know the emotional capacity of an ant doesn't exactly run very deep, but it must still be nice not to have gone through such a difficult struggle alone. Whether they consciously know it or not, I'd like to believe that at some capacity, these two sisters have bonded through their experience of becoming mothers and successfully bringing forth a new colony into the world. And yes, the sister queens will need to be separated at some point to avoid getting, removed from power. But for now, it has been inspiring to witness one of nature's rarely observed partnerships that bend the rules of their species for the good of the colony. And of course, this is just the beginning of their story and their kingdoms. There are many more tales ahead for the minions of Midas, like figuring out exactly how and when to split the colony in half. But that's a tale for another time, as the story of the ants marches on. Earlier this year, I got a colony of big-headed ants that I named the Megamines. I actually wasn't super fond of them at first, But these mischievous little bobbleheads have shown me who they are and won me over with the story I'm about to tell you. The personality of these tiny rascals is exactly why I love keeping colonies of various species, because they're all unique. In case you didn't figure it out by the name big-headed ants, their species, Pheidole bicarinata, have soldiers with massive heads for defense and crushing seeds. You can watch their first video here if you haven't seen it. After the initial hustle and bustle of that video, which took place during the first couple weeks that I got them, their activities died down. For several weeks, the Outworld was a bit of a ghost town, and they didn't seem very hungry, leaving most of their protein untouched. There's no way I could possibly do a head count, so I couldn't really tell if they were growing or shrinking. Then I remembered how a little heat went a long way in saving my colony of long-legged ants, the Raiders of Arrakis, which have an epic story in the works, by the way. So I put the Megamines on a heat pad. Not very high, but just enough to give them a little bit of warmth. And the results were shocking. In a matter of days, they went from being pretty boring homebodies hiding in their tube to adventurous busybodies patrolling their territory and holding secret meetings. It's as if they were on low battery and I just put them on a charging mat. Maybe they are little cyborgs. With their HQ now connected to power, their personality started to come out as their operations began. Time for some observations. Observation 1. They are meticulously tidy. I noticed that despite their small size, they made great efforts to keep their enclosure organized. They have 2 distinct piles. This is their food pile of seeds which they're planning to eat, and this is their waste pile, neatly kept and even sorted by size, which makes it very convenient for me to take out their trash. I'll tell you where I got these cute little tools in a minute. The rest of their enclosure is spotless. This is a stain, otherwise they would clean that up too. So naturally, I started playing a game to mess with them by sprinkling seeds all over their outworld or messing up their piles to see what would happen. And lo and behold, I'd come back the next day to find 2 neatly sorted piles once more, which again is impressive because some of those seeds are the size of cars to them. Like God just dropped a bunch of SUVs in a parking lot and watched you clean it up. Is it mean? Yeah, maybe. But is it fun to watch? Hell yeah. Observation 2. They've got an appetite. Mealtime comes around and they get straight to it. Like clockwork, there's always a worker on patrol, so the moment that plate appears, the colony is summoned to devour whatever food is on it. I love that they wholeheartedly embrace the motto, the colony must grow. When this colony gets big, it's going to be really fun making feeding videos. Observation 3, which kicks off the main story of this video, they're good at escaping. When I first got them, I specifically used this outworld because the air slits are small enough to keep these cheeky scamps from getting out. But then, they got out, taking advantage of the tiniest gap between the panels, then giving me the finger by walking across my desk. So that was taped up and kept them contained, at least for a couple months, until one little jailbreaker figured out that when I put the lid on, and it's not pressed up against the corner just right, she could wiggle her way out. Quite the opportunist. I'm able to keep them contained as long as I make sure that the lid is butted up against this corner, but it's not a permanent fix. The Megamines are going to eventually need a new home because they're only going to increase in number. I started looking through my collection of ant nests that I've acquired and found that most of them wouldn't work for the Megamines. Either the nest was simply too big, or they had small gaps that the little minxes could exploit. The other requirement I have is that they need to be easy to capture on camera, so I can't use anything with dark surfaces or shadowy caves, or we won't be able to see them very well. I landed on this nest, which was sent to me by my friend Neek over at the Crafting Ant. He's got a great channel with lots of ant content and an awesome selection of nests in his shop. I'll do an unboxing video with the bundle of goodies that he sent me. And yes, that's also where I got the little broom and dustpan. So, we have our shoot, dang. Hold on. We have our potential nest. Yes, first try. And because this nest is part of a modular system, you can configure it however you want. It has this double water tower attachment so the ants can drink, and for most other species, this would work perfectly fine. But right away, I noticed these little gaps that I know these buggers will find a way to slip through. So, I'm going to use a simple nest and outworld setup. Now, I need to test it to make sure it can actually hold the jailbreaking Megamines. I picked up 2 of the escapees, since I figured they were the best at escaping, and dropped them into the setup to see if they could find a way out. They got straight to work, exploring every square inch of that enclosure from top to bottom. Later that day, I came back to find only a single ant was still inside. I searched the entire setup for the other worker, trying to figure out how in the world she could have escaped. I had just about reached acceptance that this nest might not work after all, until... boom! I caught her on the underside of the lid. Clever girl. Alright, escape proof? Check. But they still need a water source. How about a simple water tower? Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. Once again, their size poses another challenge. They're so small that they get sucked up into the bottle and just kinda float there on the surface. Luckily, I was able to save 2 of them. Then I found these water feeders with a tiny little sponge they can drink from, so there's no possible way that they could drown. It made me kind of sad to see that the quarter was not included, because I've really been wanting a new quarter lately. I went ahead and bought it anyway, but shipping got delayed. I have a story to tell and I gotta get this video out, so I'm making my own. I took one of the little plastic capsules I use for catching queen ants, and made a mini test tube setup with a cotton ball. See, you can get creative with what you have. Now, it's time to plan out the move. Ultimately, I want the setup to be like this, but first I need to connect the tube with this attachment. Rather than connect it directly to the nest, I'm going to give myself some options with this feeding corridor in case they take a while to move or I need to connect the outworld. Now, I'll just lock everything down just to be safe. And just like that, our nest is ready for the move. Okay. Here we go. Removing lid and initiating transfer. I'll just tap out the extra seeds and connect the 2. And stop. I don't have footage for what happened next because for whatever stupid reason, I stopped recording. So allow me to describe the situation for you as it unfolded. As I attempted to connect the test tube, it refused to fit onto the adapter. So naturally, like a freaking genius, I set it down on the table in order to close the lid to the outworld. Ants began pouring out like a bunch of 3rd graders that just witnessed a piñata get ripped in half. So I quickly grab the 2 ends and do my best to keep the tube connected to the nest to prevent more from escaping. Needless to say, the ants are still slipping through the gaps. Now, I find myself in a situation where both hands are completely occupied and I can no longer put the tube back into the box because I had closed the lid. Reaching for my camera at this point is out of the question, and there's no possible way I could put it down for even a second. So I did the only thing that I could. Babe? Babe? Honey, I need help. But alas, she was blissfully unaware in another room, headphones on, probably listening to Taylor Swift. And I'm left sitting there like an idiot with ants crawling up my hands, as I shout louder and louder until reaching a cringeworthy level of intensity that probably convinced the neighbors I was either mortally wounded or violently yelling at my wife. Finally, she heard me, thank God, and I told her to hold the tube for me while I hit record and figured out what to do. And this is where we continue. Alright. Just hang on.
Oh my gosh! Go!
Okay. Shoot, what do I do now? Just holding the tube against the nest was clearly not working. So I tell her to start sweeping up as many ants as she could into the outworld. And I gotta see this through, so I start making a seal out of putty. But that is also very ineffective, and ants are slipping out left and right. A bunch got crushed in the putty, ants are freaking out. I'm trying to get as many shots as I can so that I can even tell you this story. Neither of us knew what was going on or how to fix it. So I decided to abort. And the Megamines are... I said the You guys, you're... Hey, it's okay.
My leg!
It's gonna be alright. I just have to... You'll be fine. I just need... Okay, they need some time. After all the mayhem, I noticed something on the nest. If I slide out this little insert, it allows me to attach a small size test tube. As much as I was kicking myself right now for not seeing that ahead of time, this means that my plan might actually work after all. Do you hear that, Megamines? You'll be able to... I needed to let things die down before trying again. The next morning, things were looking fairly calm at Megamind HQ. There were a handful of workers in the Outworld, but the majority were still inside the tube. Now was my chance. I got everything set up once more to make the move, this time making sure that the plastic insert was taken out, and my wife had a heads up in case things went crazy again. Alright, initiating transfer. Positioning, and tube connected, without one single escapee. We have some stragglers in the Outworld, but we can dump them in once the colony is moved. The question now is, will they actually move out? Young colonies can be especially stubborn when relocating to a new setup. At first, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in the newly connected space. There was mostly conversation about who turned on the lights and when their next meal was going to show up. That is, until one curious mind dared to venture into the new territory and investigate. Now, the way that ants communicate is fascinating to watch, and you're about to see that in action. They talk by producing dozens of different pheromones, chemical signals that convey specific information to other colony members. There's alarm pheromones, food is this way pheromones, I'm one of you, don't eat me pheromones, I'm a hungry larva, please feed me pheromones, and many more. Right now, these workers are emitting the hey, come check out this new area I found pheromone. As more and more workers catch on to the scent, the colony begins to explore their new area. Once the nest was discovered, the news really started to spread. Workers were going back and forth, bringing their friends to see the cave for themselves. This went on for quite a while before anything actually happened, until I saw it. Right there. One worker had the idea of bringing a larva to the new home where it was nice and dark, and released an invitation to do the same. Then another worker hit the like and subscribe buttons, which I appreciated very much. They also picked up a larva, then another, and another. As the pheromone signal got stronger, more and more joined in. However, there were some that disagreed with this effort and started bringing brood back to the nest. But the majority were voting to move. This is how an ant colony makes decisions. Ants aren't ruled by the queen. It's actually a democracy in its purest form. So fun to watch. The brood pile continued to shrink until most of the colony had left. There were a stubborn few that were refusing to move, so I used a bright light to give them a nudge. That seemed to do the trick. Eventually, Queen Cerebella grew uncomfortable with the bright light and began to consider leaving as well. She wasn't too sure about it though, as she was quite fond of her current home. Her steps were slow and uneasy as she hesitantly ventured from her throne. So, a group of her daughters began pushing her on, escorting their queen towards the new nest. She really took some coaxing here, and that's when I noticed that she was missing her right middle leg. I wonder what happened. Luckily, a queen doesn't need to do much walking. This is about as far as she... Wait, hold on. Where are you going? She was having second thoughts and decided to go back. Several minutes later, the workers managed to turn her around again and push her towards the exit, releasing the pheromone that says, "Your Majesty, let's go, you need to move." Reluctantly, Queen Cerebella yielded and followed her escort out of the test tube, then across the open feeding corridor, and finally, into the new nest. The queen was now safely inside the new Megamind HQ. The few remaining workers were taking a stand against leaving their home. I left the light on for over an hour, but their protest continued. So I disconnected the tube and dumped them into the Outworld. It may look messy now, but you and I both know that they'll clean it up. There's something super satisfying about holding the entire colony in this little box. I really do love this nest. Now the time had come to finally connect the Outworld and reunite the stranded workers with the rest of the colony. And there we go. A little panic from some of the workers, but not too bad. The Megaminds have officially moved into their new home. This should leave them with plenty of... Is that a head? This should leave them with plenty of room to grow, until I'll eventually have to move them again. But hopefully that's not for a while. Thanks again to the crafting ant for providing this awesome nest. Links to his channel and store are in the description. These little troublemakers are so fun to watch. And the following morning, I found their outworld clean and spotless, just as predicted. They had even swept all of their dirt and trash into the dish for me to pick up. Thanks, little ones. I'm eager to see what the Megaminds do with their new space, and what shenanigans they'll surprise us with next, as the story of the ants marches on.
This week on Cole's Ants, two colonies go head-to-head in the ultimate showdown.
Okay, let me explain. At the beginning of this year, I introduced two new colonies that I have been completely enthralled with. One has been the source of endless entertainment with their weird behaviors, and the other are a bunch of feisty warriors that have managed to come back from the brink of extinction. Back in March, they both had exactly 12 workers and have been growing their forces over the last few months. But before we watch this arms race unfold, I need to set the stage and give some context about their natural rivalry. So let's meet our two opposing factions on a species level. In the first corner, we have Novomessor cockerelli, commonly known as the desert long-legged ant. Recognized by their elongated bodies, spider-like legs, distinctive spines, and reddish-brown color. Their colony name, the Raiders of Arrakis, ruled by their queen, the Duchess of Dune. In the other corner, we have Pogonomyrmex rugosus, commonly known as the rough harvester ant. Built more like stumpy little dwarves with boxy heads. They mainly eat seeds and wield a painful sting. Their colony name, the bulldozers, ruled by Queen Barley. Most ants are generalists, eating a variety of different food sources. Sure, some species are specialized to live off particular foods like seeds, sugar, or meat. But when it comes down to it, food is food, and when resources are scarce, you'll eat whatever you can. After all, the colony must grow. So while some Pogonomyrmex species can live exclusively on seeds, and Novomessor cockerelli can live entirely off insects, Pogonomyrmex rugosus use insect protein to feed their growing larvae, and Novomessor cockerelli will take advantage of seeds when food is hard to find. Both species are native to the arid regions of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico, and that overlap in habitat and diet breeds competition. But this rivalry isn't just manufactured for the sake of a story. In the wild, these two species are actually at odds. In fact, Novomessor workers will set out early in the morning and fill the entrances of nearby Pogonomyrmex nests with sand, pebbles, and debris before they have a chance to begin their daily activities. This delays the Pogos by 1 to 3 hours, giving the Novos a head start on foraging for seeds and insects. So this is war, an actual simulation of the arms race that would occur in nature to outgrow and outcompete the other colony to become ruler of the desert. And with that context, the battle begins on March 19th, 2025, with both armies having 12 workers and a big pile of brood. Their numbers are about to take off. 2 weeks have passed, and it's time to see if one of them has taken the lead. It looks like the bulldozers have nearly doubled their numbers, from 12 to 22, and still have a good pile of brood. The Raiders of Arrakis now have 18 workers, a little behind, but judging by their impressive brood pile, I'd say they could definitely make a comeback. There is something else to report. I found a dead worker in the Raiders' outworld. And I also found a dead worker in the Bulldozers' outworld. I'm not sure why both colonies have lost a worker, but it's something to keep an eye on. The Raiders' water source is very small, and I'm noticing a little discoloration, so I've given them a fresh test tube and moved the cover. Hopefully, that'll convince them to move into the clean setup. A few days later, and they haven't moved out of the old tube. They've instead decided to just occupy both tubes. Not exactly what I had in mind, but I guess that's fine. A week later, and fortunately there were no dead bodies. The Harvesters had gained 2 more recruits, but the Longlegs had gained 6, now putting the score at 23 to 24. I also noticed that the Raiders had moved a bunch of dirt towards the back of the enclosure, creating these little hills. The Bulldozers were also doing a lot of digging, although they didn't seem to be making any visible progress. No, despite their name, they don't seem to be very good diggers at all, really. Maybe that's why the strategy of filling in their nests is so effective. The following week held some interesting developments in the battle for the desert. The Raiders of Arrakis had completely terraformed their entire setup, excavating all the sand to the back of the Outworld. Why? I have no idea. But this was no small undertaking. They had also been busy turning the tide, because for the first time, they have surpassed the bulldozers, putting the score at 27-24. The war was heating up. There were also casualties on the battlefield. Both sides had suffered losses. 3 dead for the Raiders, and an alarming 5 dead for the bulldozers, which is why they've remained at 24. But that wasn't the only bad news to report. This was the first time that either colony hadn't touched their food. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. Nothing else had changed. See here how this worker is acting drunk? That probably means she's dying. I had to start troubleshooting, going through the various possibilities to find the issue. To start, I gave the bulldozers a fresh, clean tube as well, in case it had something to do with their tube. Some people might look at these setups and just see a bunch of ants aimlessly moving around and occasionally eating some food. But there is a lot going on when you stop to look. They are organized, coordinated, and busy. Each colony is a well-oiled machine working to raise an actual army. Because in the wild, these two species wouldn't be safeguarded by these plastic tubs. They might have to go to war with other colonies or succumb to the many dangers of the desert. As the weeks rolled on, I had some time to experiment with different solutions. I can't say that I've identified the cause of the mysterious deaths, but the frequency has decreased, and they have continued to eat. The desert has been claiming about 1 long-legged ant a week, which isn't good, but it's still an improvement. And in 5 weeks, the bulldozers have only lost 2 workers. The bulldozers are so weird and different from my other ants.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
You think, oh, food appears, and they should all work together to break it down and carry it back to the nest, right? Not really. As you can see here, they initially come over to check it out, but then leave this worker to do it all herself. Then when reinforcements do finally show up, they aren't always helpful, like this little genius just attacking the dish. An inspiring demonstration of the collective intelligence of their species, a shining example of the supportive and collaborative nature of these amazing insects. A testament to the astounding design that you get the idea. They're dumb. She's even shaking the dish around. Meanwhile, the Raiders are like, fresh food? Alright, let's get to work. Fast forward over a month, and the bulldozers have not had a single death. Whatever was causing them to die seems to have run its course. Unfortunately, that's not the case for the Raiders, who are continuing to lose workers at an unsettling rate of 2 to 3 deaths a week. Despite their losses, they are miraculously still increasing in number and continue to hold the lead. But not by much. The bulldozers are just a few workers behind now. I need to take action and try to stop whatever's killing them. I believe that there may be a clue in the fact that they moved all of their dirt away from the entrance of their nests. Perhaps there's something harmful in the sand they're trying to avoid. I think my best course of action is to move them into a new setup, and I have a formicarium that I've been saving just for them. But we'll save that for next time, as the story of the ants marches on. A mysterious force has been working against my colony of desert long-legged ants, named the Raiders of Arrakis. They've been on quite the journey this past year, growing from just a handful of workers into an army now approaching 50. But a curse has plagued their colony from the beginning. Back when the colony was new, they started losing workers. One by one, the colony shrank until it was just 3 workers and the queen. That's when I put them in an incubator and things started to turn around. Their numbers began increasing once again, and they even surpassed their rivals, my colony of rough harvester ants, named the bulldozers. But even though their numbers are increasing, workers are continuing to die off at an alarming rate, and I have no idea why. And with another 5 dead just this week, something needs to change. This is the story of how I moved my long-legged ants in an attempt to stop these mysterious deaths. The past several weeks, I've been trying to isolate the issue by going through a list of everything that I can think of that could be killing them. If you're having trouble with one of your own colonies, these may be helpful factors for you to consider as well. Just know that the needs of the ants can vary greatly between species. Number 1. Clean water. Their original test tube barely had any water at all, but I have since given them a clean tube, so they're good to go there. Same goes for humidity, which is provided by the sponge. For food, because these are mainly carnivorous ants, I feed them a variety of crickets, fruit flies, mealworms, and occasionally some nectar. But it's the same food that I feed my other colonies, who are doing just fine. And it's not like they're dying all at once, as you would expect if they were eating tainted food. So I'm crossing that one off as well. Heat. Because these are desert ants, I've been giving them plenty of heat with a gradient, so that shouldn't be an issue either. Next, I checked for mites, which can infest ant colonies and cause death. But upon closer inspection of the bodies, they were clean. The last thing that I can think of is that it has something to do with the substrate. Perhaps the sand is somehow tainted with chemicals or harmful bacteria. That could explain why they moved all of the dirt to the back of the outworld, away from the entrances to their nests. This seemed like a reasonable guess, and I don't have anything to lose here. Plus, the colony is reaching a good size where I can move them into a formicarium. So let's do it. Let's give them a new home and see if the issue subsides. This is the nest I've chosen. It has white walls which will make them easy to see, and you can attach more modules as the colony grows. The raiders aren't large enough to occupy this entire nest just yet, so this red tab is here to keep the chambers separated until they need more space. Since the water tower for humidity is in the bottom chamber, I'll attach the outworld on the side like this, at least until they have access to the full nest. To make the outworld look nice, I added this dirt that I collected out in the desert, close to their natural habitat, so there shouldn't be anything harmful in here. But this outworld can only fit one test tube, so I'll have to attach a second one to hold the other tube during the move. Now we have to prep the nest and make it more appealing than their current home, otherwise the ants will stay right where they are. So first, I'll need to hydrate the nest. In a test tube setup, humidity and drinking water are conveniently provided by the sponge, but with a nest like this, they need to be provided separately. This cavity holds water, which increases the humidity of the nest, which is important for the brood's development. Next, we'll add this red cover, which will make the nest seem nice and dark. Ants can't see red light very well, so this allows them to feel safe while allowing us to peek inside. And finally, this is a heated nest, so we'll plug it in and set it to a cozy temperature because these ants like it hot. Now we're ready for the move. Okay, how do we do this smoothly? There's bound to be chaos either way, so I guess I'll just go for it. Moving the first tube now. Oh wow, that was surprisingly easy. They don't even seem bothered by it at all. Now for the original test tube, their main home, placing them in now. There was some commotion going on inside the nest. Suddenly, their dark home was exposed to the light, and they appeared to be in a new area. I watched the entrance of the nest to see which brave worker would be the first to venture outside. And we have a winner! Not wasting any time, she soon discovered there was an opening in the wall. She entered, discovering the spacious cavern inside. Then she thought, I'm gonna need some backup for this, and left. Meanwhile, in the test tube on the other side of the nest, nothing was happening. And I mean that literally. Not a single ant was moving a muscle. They were just standing there like little statues. Interesting observation, but not actually interesting to observe. So we'll come back to them. The explorer that found the cave had already spread the word, and the colony had mounted an expedition to investigate every corner of the newly found tunnels. The ants continued to communicate with each other about what they were finding in this new world. Even the Duchess herself made an appearance at the nest's entrance. As we've seen before, the Duchess is not a shy queen. Most other queens stay deep in the nest where it's safe, but she's pretty quick to jump straight into the action, a warrior queen. As more and more ants began occupying the cave, It didn't take long at all before the workers decided that this would make a good home for the colony. Within about 3 minutes, I already saw workers starting to move the brood. This was definitely the fastest I'd ever seen a colony initiate a move. I took it as a sign that for whatever reason, they weren't very happy with their old home. And there goes the queen. I checked in on the other side, only to find that nothing has happened? Still? Why are they frozen like that? Maybe this is just the sleeping tube. Just look at the difference in activity level. Or maybe, oh, I get it now. These are union workers. Why work more than you need to, right? The stranded workers that were left behind in the old Outworld were very confused, wandering around, wondering where everyone went. This little one had returned home with a tasty cricket leg, only to find that home wasn't there anymore. I guess it's time to reunite them with the rest of the colony. Come with me!
I can show you the world.
And there we go. One by one, I started scooping them up. However, being the feisty little fighters they are, they like to attack anything that gets too close, including the brush. Wow, you got quite the grip there, don't ya? Just really hanging onto those bristles. Okay, you can let go now. Let it go. Let it go.
Let it go.
Oh man, I really gotta stop. This was kind of funny to film the first time, but got real old real quick, because the rest of them also clamped down on the brush and wouldn't let go for several minutes. Come on, get off, you little doofus. I don't even know what to do here. Can I use tweezers to... No, I'd pop their little head. Fear me, puny ant! Please get off. Well, that was exhausting, but I finally got all the little suckers out of there. Oh, we got a runner. Where do you think you're going? No, I don't think so. Get back in there. Surely by now the other test tube is still standing there? Yo, what's going on? Well, I can see we're making a lot of progress over here. What are you doing? Just spinning around, huh? See, this is what blows my mind about ants. Collectively, they accomplish amazing things. They build incredible structures, manage fungus farms for food, raise and protect livestock. They even rebalance the delegation of labor roles when the workforce has too few workers doing a particular task. And yet, the individual ant is as dumb as a tree stump. This phenomenon of a bunch of stupid things coming together to make really smart things is called emergence, by the way. It happens all over nature and it's fascinating. You should look it up. Okay, where were we? Since the other half of the colony had now fully moved out of their original test tube, I figure we can consolidate down a bit. So I'll transfer our second tube of less motivated workers to the other side, disconnect the Outworld, pick up Spinderella here, who got left behind, and now we can watch the rest of the colony move in. And move in they did. The other workers wasted no time transferring the rest of the brood into the new nest. Now that the Raiders of Arrakis have settled in, let's take a tour of their new home. Hopefully, this new setup will finally put an end to the mysterious deaths and allow the Raiders' numbers to really take off. There have already been some interesting developments that I've seen from them, along with some odd behaviors like digging a ring around their water tower? But we'll save that for another time, as the story of the ants marches on. If you enjoyed this story, drop a like and check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching.